All right, well, here to discuss this week's headlines is host of the WGN Political Report, Paul Lisnek. Paul,
Hi,
how
guys.
you doing?
Hey,
We got a
happy
holiday
Friday.
weekend.
Yes, we're glad to have you here. Got a lot to throw at you here.
Yep.
Earlier this week, we'll start at the city level. Mayor Johnson had to defend his minority hiring practices within his administration. The very next day, the Department of Justice sends a letter saying it's investigating. What do you make of where this fight is going to land?
Well, you're right. He's in a church, and that's where he talks about the fact that, look, I've made important appointments with people of color. When you look at the office overall in general, that is to say his administration, it's about a third white, roughly a third African-American, and then the balance third of Hispanic, Asian, and others. So it's fairly balanced. That was his point. But as you say, Ray, the next day, boom, and in comes a complaint from the Department of Justice. I should say, he says he hasn't received a formal letter yet, but basically they're concerned about DEI hiring and did he consider race in his hiring. The thing is, as it goes for whatever happens to it, clearly this is about retribution. Obviously President Trump does not like him, and he's no fan of President Trump's, but moving forward, the truth is that having diversity in an administration is not a violation of civil rights, so I don't see where it goes, but it'll be problematic, at least for a while, as the administration does what it does.
It's getting testy. He used the word monster describing President Trump.
Well, right, and if Trump finds out about that, it's just going to get him anger. And, there is a sense of retribution with the president that he wants to come after you if you do something to him.
Let's talk tariffs. The president saying he wants to instate a 50% tariff on goods from the EU starting June 1st. He says trade talks are going badly. He's also saying he doesn't want a deal. This is the deal. So what are we supposed to expect?
Well, and of course, remember, he's threatening Apple too, right? With 25% to Apple, but it won't just be them, it'll be Samsung. Everybody makes these phones. I think that the downside of this for the president is the fact that the message, market's down today, but the message he's sending is so confusing to people. Tariffs on, tariffs off. Remember, he said that everybody's coming to us, begging for us to talk to them. Please sit with us. We want to trade with you and have deals. We're going to do 90 deals in 90 days. You can't help but say none of that could have been true because we wouldn't be where we are. He's only announced a couple of interactions, and those he's not happy with, at least as you say, the UK. Some comments that some analysts on his, Scott Bessent has said, well, a lot of the EU doesn't know what the rest of the part is thinking. I'm not so sure there's truth to that. The bottom line to it is there's just uncertainty in these relationships. It's market volatility, and the question is if you're negotiating with the US, how much faith do you put in where those negotiations end up? Because you never know if the rug's going to get pulled the next day.
From tariffs to legislation, the U.S. House passed President Trump's big agenda bill.
Well, you can call it the one big beautiful bill because not only did Trump call it that, that is the name of the bill.
That's the name of the bill.
That's the title on there. So the big beautiful bill made its way through the House. Finally, what do you think will happen once it lands in the Senate?
Well, I think what's going to happen is the Senate, they're going to complain a lot right now. You're already hearing senators, I can't do this, that the debt is going up tremendously and there's not enough cuts and they're all over the place. And senators are not the House, I will say. Senators are much more respected and have much more level heads, with all due respect to congressmen, but it's just sort of the way it is in the Senate. I think even congressmen would agree with you on that. But the bottom line is they're going to complain and moan for a while, but in the end, I would bet that this bill passes. They'll tweak to it, they'll make some changes to it, but the way it's been written by the House, it's so detailed and so complex, there's actually not a lot that the Senate could do and then keep it alive, and they're not going to kill it. So it will eventually pass. There'll be some moaning and groaning. But I'll tell you what, it's 1,000 pages of a fascinating read. There's stuff in this bill. For example, they've removed a requirement that silencers be registered when it comes to guns. I'm not sure what that has to do with budgeting, but that got snuck in there. There's all sorts of things, and I guess as Democrats will spend a lot of time reading the bill, coming up with a variety of things that are in there. Lots of cuts. The president and Republicans said Medicaid's not getting touched, Medicare's not getting touched. Those are getting touched without question, and it's the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, which is basically, it's nonpartisan. They would have had the same report if this was a Democratic bill. But the bottom line is there are going to be impacts, and we're going to see who sells it better to the American people, Republicans versus Democrats.
Let's talk about the Pentagon. There's an update to the jet from Qatar.
Yeah.
The Pentagon says they will accept the plane despite the $1 billion it could cost to retrofit it, the security concerns, the political blowback. Is this a legal move?
So my concern when I put on my legal hat is the issue here is, here's what's amazing. The Constitution is pretty clear that you can't accept this kind of gift, right? Now, the president will say it's not a gift to me, it's a gift to the government, but even the Statue of Liberty was a gift to the government, and it has to be approved by Congress. That's in the Constitution. What I really find fascinating about this is there anybody who thinks that Congress would not take 20 minutes and give the president permission, right? He controls the Senate, he controls the House, he's going to get what he wants. The concern for me is that he didn't even bother to do that, didn't even bother to get the permission, which means he has little concern for letting Congress get in the way of what he chooses to do. If I were Congress, I would have gone to see the president and say, sir, we're going to give you what you want. Why can't you let us do what we're constitutionally required to do? They have no spine, they have no backbone, so the bottom line is nothing happens. But that's the concern. It's not even the plane. I would also predict, by the way, that by the time it's retrofitted, based on predictions, President Trump will never ride in this plane as president. This may be part of his parting bag when he leaves office at the end, and it goes to his library.
Because it just takes too long to get.
Yeah,
those
they just
fixes
can't. There's
made.
no way. They got to take it down to the very bone.
Let's shift now to the president's beef with Harvard. He doesn't want the university to allow foreign students to attend there. Harvard has sued, saying that's unconstitutional.
And they're winning on this one.
Right.
Yeah.
A federal court has blocked it, at least.
Temporary restraining
At least for now. Can a president determine which students and where they're from who attend a private university?
So the issue is that where the administration has control is on who enters the country and issuing of the visas. That's not a Harvard thing, right?
Right.
So the government is putting its stake in the world of, we need information on these people. We need to know their disciplinary records. They're asking for all sorts of things. Harvard says we have complied. We're not giving you everything you want because you're not entitled to it, but we're giving you what we're required to give you. Clearly, again, this is it's clearly retribution from the president who has it out for Harvard. Harvard did get a TRO. By the way, in a related world, in the legal world today, Jenner and Block, law firm in Chicago, they were issued a permanent permanent order that protects them from the actions that the administration is trying to take. So the bottom line is the administration is being incredibly, taking a lot of steps against the people it considers enemies and that it doesn't like, but those who fight it in the courts are doing well because the administration, whether you love President Trump or not, just can't do what it's doing without permission.
Well, another testy meeting with presidents in the White House, and national reporting indicates that there was some photographic falsehoods that the president may have put forth to the South African president in that refugee controversy. What was your takeaway in that?
Well, the bottom line is, and I've seen enough analysts from South Africa who have talked about this, that some say the president of South Africa was aware that this, he's going to get hit with all this, but it seems to be pretty clear, at least from anybody in South Africa, African American or white, or I should say black or white, who basically said, look, these videos aren't true. They're conspiracy videos, the kind of things that, we've seen over the course of the past years. But, the president believes them, and so they're having to defend it. I thought it was interesting that the president of South Africa brought white golfers with him and other members of his government who are white, basically saying, hey, they wouldn't be here if this was really, if we were killing white farmers in South Africa. But the president believes what he wants. I mean, the bigger issue for me right now, not bigger issue, but if you're a world leader, why do you want to come to the Oval Office? This is the second time now that somebody's come for a meeting, Zelensky, now South Africa, and it's an ambush. So if I'm from another country, I'm thinking, why do I need this? I'm not sure I do.
Let's talk about eminent domain and how it may or may not apply in the village of Dalton when it comes to Pope Leo's home.
Right.
How would that work?
So Pope Leo grows up in Dalton, and the owners of the house were coincidentally putting it on the market, I think for $199,000. Boom, Leo becomes Pope. They pulled it off the market, probably to put it on for 10 times that amount. But in comes the city to go, whoa, 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 eminent domain, which means we have the right to take private property for public use. And a government does have the right to do it, but it's got to be for public use. So if Dalton is looking to take it to make it a museum, for example, they would probably win on that. If they're taking it because they want to sell it to make all the money, that they would not be allowed to do. Ordinarily, public domain is we need a road, we need an expressway. That's when they take private lands. But this could be for museum. That would be legitimate. But then they have to pay just compensation. What is that? That's the lawsuit. That'll be the fight. Because you can be sure Dalton will say, well, it's worth worth no more than $199,000. That's what you had it on the market for. And the owners of the house will go, I'm sorry, but it's the Pope's house. It's worth $8,199,000.
Wow. We'll see, huh?
And it will ultimately go to court where a decision will be made. That'll take some time to get through.
That's an interesting case study in eminent domain.
Imagine having
in
a
Dalton,
home,
of
you're
all
going to
places.
sell it and whatever, you're going,
Yeah.
who lived here? Oh, we're going
The
to raise the
Pope.
price.
All right, tell us about Sunday's show.
On Sunday, we've got Tim Miller. He's with the Bulwark, and he's also written a book. He's a former Republican operative who's now with this group that are basically never Trumpers, but they're former Republicans. Incredible analysis. He's going to join me to talk about what's going on currently in the administration. We're going to also run part of a panel that I moderated at the Chicago Bar Association a few weeks ago on gun violence with Kwame Raoul in attendance. And I always like to talk about the midday when we have a fun author coming up. So this Thursday, I'll be interviewing Leah Littman, who's the author of a book called Lawless, in which she takes a very close look at the Supreme Court and what it does. So that'll be sort of interesting.
Busy as always.
Yes. I wish you a reflective Memorial Day weekend.
You as well.
You as well. Thank you.